Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Recovery Summit presentation. We're really excited. We've had a wonderful month, and this is the last week of our presentations for the month of September, which is Recovery Month. Your Recovery Summit that you've been attending this month is presented by St. Clair County Community Mental Health with support from the St. Clair County Health Department. Today's presentation is supporting recovery for co-occurring disorders through mindfulness-based relapse prevention. Before we begin, as always, we want to go over a couple of general reminders. As a reminder, go ahead and use the chat feature for all comments or questions. Our presenter, Michelle, will be answering questions as time allows at the end of the presentation. If we don't have time, she's going to share her contact information. So if you have questions and you want to directly contact her, you'll be able to do that. Today's presentation offers one social work CE and one McBAP credit and one peer credit. If you're requesting professional credits, you must remain on the webinar for the entire time of the presentation today. For any reason, if you happen to lose connection or connectivity, go ahead and log back on so we can give you credit for the entire time. As a reminder, as all the other presentations, a survey will pop up during the conclusion of the webinar. It's a very short survey. We appreciate any feedback you have. And those of you that are requesting social work CEs, a completion of the survey is necessary. Now, I would like to go ahead and introduce today's presenter. I'm excited. I know Michelle and very excited to have her with us today. Michelle Boudreau is a member of MINT, which is the MINT, Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, and she's been providing mental health and co-occurring services since 1996. She's provided direct care services. She's had oversight of many evidence-based practices, including IDDT, MI, DBT, FPE, IPS, recovery, illness and management, integrated healthcare, etc. for many years within the community mental health system. She currently works for MDHHS in the community practices and innovation section as the evidence-based practice specialist, focusing on evidence-based practices for adults struggling with severe mental illness and co-occurring disorders. So with that, I would like to go ahead and turn the floor over to Michelle. Good morning, Michelle.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the introduction. And I was just kind of watching the chat and seeing all these individuals coming from all over the state. So welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending. And hopefully you'll be able to take a little bit of nugget of information from this training. And I do want to make one kind of just this training today. It isn't a training that will allow you to leave here and provide mindfulness-based relapse prevention. So I do want to share that. However, I'm hoping to be able to give you a strong overview of what it is. And throughout, I tried to pick 3 different exercises that we will do throughout the training, just to kind of give you a little bit of taste of activities that you would provide within this evidence-based treatment. So just kind of keep in mind, though, it isn't enough information for you to actually be able to provide it. And we'll go a little bit more into that as we go. So, and yes, Adrian is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, please feel free to put that out there. So just to give you a little bit of history. So I first really got into mindfulness, experimented a little bit with it on and off, but really got more into it when I was providing DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy, and a core component of it is mindfulness. And so one of the things with mindfulness, just to distinguish it a little bit from meditation, is meditation is a type of mindfulness. However, it is not the only kind of mindfulness. So when we think about mindfulness, we're really thinking about when we choose to intentionally be present in the moment. and we're trying to be one mindful and to really stay in the moment with whatever we're doing. So you may heard of mindful eating, mindful walking, just focusing on the breath. Mindfulness can be as simple as washing the dishes and just being aware of, our hands touching the dish, the water running over our hands and feeling the sensation and the pressure. So the idea of beginner's mind or curiosity, looking at each, kind of taking that fresh look in any given moment and trying to just fully be aware of what's happening. The other part of mindfulness is really trying to take that non-judgmental stance, not judging where we're at, not judging the sensations we feel, the emotions that might arise, or our thoughts. It's really kind of just noticing, observing, and letting it pass by. The idea of allowing the experience to just be as it is. Trying to be also in the moment, bringing ourselves back to the moment. As thoughts may pop in about the past or the future, just allowing it to happen, noticing it, but gently bringing ourselves back. So why mindfulness? So there's lots of stuff out there now about the benefits of mindfulness, from increasing your focus, decreasing stress, anxiety. There's been much research on benefits health-wise, lowering blood pressure, helping us to manage chronic pain, chronic illnesses, overall sense of well-being. So the other thing is, and this is kind of a little bit from a DBT perspective, of being able to look at, how do we reduce suffering, and how bringing attention to how when we go out of the present moment and we think too much about the past or too much about the future, we can cause ourselves undue suffering and pain. And in any given moment, if we can just bring ourselves to the present, that we still may have pain, we still may have uncomfortable feelings, and we're not making our situation worse. We're not increasing our suffering, and just allowing ourselves to experience whatever it is at that moment in time. So when we look at mindfulness-based relapse prevention for co-occurring disorders, some of the research out there has just supported that incorporating it. So this is kind of an isn't seen as this is the only treatment. This is more of, this is an additive. This is in addition to whatever other treatment is being provided, and to support someone's recovery. And so when it is added into whatever else that a person sees as their recovery journey and what they need to support that, compared to just regular treatment, it has been shown to reduce depression, anxiety, and cravings. And adding that mindfulness-based relapse component to regular, typical just relapse prevention, it's shown over time a decrease in the frequency of use, a decrease in fewer, heavier days of use, and to decrease other substance-related concerns, whether it's cravings, struggles with emotions. The other thing that I really like about this, and part of, our natural human tendency, is we don't like discomfort, and we do many things to avoid being uncomfortable. and including whether it's, behaviors with addiction, avoiding, keeping ourselves so busy that we don't have time to think, we don't have time to sit with the uncomfortableness. So one of the things that mindfulness-based relapse prevention does is it helps us increase our approach to coping and to be more intentional about we handle stress, pain, any emotions that we kind of tend to label as more bad emotions. It helps us to be able to more sit with that discomfort and to look at other ways to cope with it that maybe leads us to more effective coping or helps support us more accomplishing whatever our goals are or our life worth living. So kind of an indirect effect of mindfulness is the more we are able to approach and sit with that discomfort, it indirectly then supports us being able to more regulate our emotions and manage our emotions more effectively. And there's also been studies showing that it has helped women struggling with co-occurring disorders to sustain decreased symptoms of PTSD. So just to kind of give you a little bit of the evolution into mindfulness-based relapse prevention is originally Jon Kabat-Zinn developed mindfulness-based stress reduction. And as that evolved, Siegel Williams and Teasdale incorporated mindfulness-based stress reduction in with more cognitive therapy. And then, so when you're looking at mindfulness-based relapse prevention and providing it, it's a combination of kind of trying to synthesize mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and relapse prevention model. And keeping that in mind, if this is something that you decide that you would like to provide to individuals, one of the things you want to look at is a couple of things. In order to provide this, it is strongly recommended and encouraged to have your own practice. And part of that is you want to be able to share in the experiential. Our tendency as humans is to stay stuck in our stories, stay stuck in the context. And we really push away from just being in the experience of the moment and experiencing our physical body, experiencing just what is happening and just noticing. We try to, in many, many different ways, push that away. And so the more that we practice and we have our own consistent mindfulness that we do, the more that we can be in the experience. And when we're providing this treatment, we can be able to share our experiences with those that are in the group and that are trying to incorporate this into their lives. And being able to take that curiosity of like, that's interesting, that this is happening now, that I'm noticing this tightness or this feeling inside me and how it's running through my body, and that this emotion, is happening at this time. And I have the thoughts of, I want to get the heck out of here. Or, you know what, I don't want to deal with this at all. So it's really important to really be able to become comfortable with our own experiences, which is going to give so much more to the group in providing that support and guidance through the process. The other thing to strongly encourage, if this is a treatment that you want to take up, is is to look at not only getting training in this. There are trainings that are fully offered to offer this whole series. There's also, and there's even free things you can go online where you can go through your own, and typically there are 8 weeks of mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, or mindfulness-based relapse prevention, to be able to go through the whole experience. And it also helps you to create your own routine and mindfulness, and getting that as just a part of your everyday living. So when you're providing mindfulness-based prevention, so overall, it's a series of 8 sessions, and some of the primary intentions are looking at increasing our awareness, being able to intentionally choose to be in the moment and experience the moment, to become more aware of when we go to automatic pilot. And if you can think about times in your life, one of the best examples that I can think of is just, which has happened to me, is, you're driving and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I've been on the road for 20 minutes and I really can't remember what I've passed or what the scenery or how I even got to this point, that we can get so caught up in our automatic behavior. Or even with eating, you sit down to eat and the next thing you know, your plate's gone, and you haven't really noticed the taste, the textures, the smells of the food. So becoming more aware of our automatic thoughts and becoming more intentional about how we live and respond and experience each moment. It also is a way for us to become more comfortable with the uncomfortable, to help increase our tolerance of sitting with uncomfortable physical sensations, uncomfortable emotions, and even thoughts, and not having that urge to just react to them and do something to either make it go away or make ourselves feel better, and just sit and notice. And being able to recognize that everything's kind of this wave or continuum, and that our emotions and thoughts aren't necessarily facts, and they're not going to last forever. And then the last part is being able to really look at developing some self-compassion and cultivating that self-compassion for ourselves, decreasing judgments of ourselves, and then allowing that to then move into those around us. So mindfulness-based relapse prevention really focuses on the experiential, not the stories that we tell ourselves, not, everything that runs through our minds that we hold on to or we attach to. And part as the facilitator is looking at the inquiry of helping to kind of debrief in that, and helping members in the group to continue to be aware of that immediate experience, getting them out of our story. Because when we talk about, okay, when we just did that practice, what did you experience? We tend to go back to our story or the pain or the suffering. And so our guiding is to help us to stay in that moment and experience. And to also explore what was familiar about that experience that maybe we've experienced before, or that what happens, or what was different. Maybe this is something new. You notice something that you haven't really noticed before. Like, wow, I didn't know that when I had this thought, I immediately have this like tightening in my stomach, or I feel nauseous, or I feel hot, or I have this emotion pop up and I haven't noticed that before. So it could be, hey, this is something I noticed that maybe does pop up in my everyday life, or it's new. And then it's also bringing it back to how is this relevant in our everyday life? How is this with how we interact with others, how we interact with ourselves, how we experience our world? And then also trying to look at, and this kind of goes into cultivating that kindness and compassion, is just looking at our humanness, that it makes sense with us being humans, that we might have judgments, that we might, that's what our mind does. It goes off, it wanders. We struggle with being in the moment. So this is just to kind of give you a picture of, of looking at when we're going through the inquiry is, we're really trying to stay as much as we can with direct experiences. We're not trying to go into the story, going into deep into like attaching to the discomfort. It's more of a noticing and just experiencing it. But we're not holding on to it so tightly where it can increase the thoughts, increase the feelings, or make the situation worse. It's again taking that, that curiosity, like, it's interesting that this is popping up now. What is it about this moment that I have this thought, and then I experience this, and then I have this other thought, and how it just kind of plays into this cycle, but not attaching to it so it's not increasing. So some of the things to when you're meeting with a group and you're first providing this treatment, you want to ideally meet with individuals prior to really kind of explore, what are their expectations? What are their thoughts on mindfulness? What are their beliefs? And to also address things that are common, potentially myths about mindfulness, or fears or concerns that they'll do it wrong, that they have to do it in a certain way, being mindful of how, as we are being mindful, uncomfortableness may arise that you aren't expecting, especially when individuals have a history of trauma. And, a high percentage of individuals with co-occurring disorders do struggle, have experienced trauma, and being aware of how that might rise. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go through this presentation to kind of talk about how to manage that within the group. Some other considerations is when we look at mindfulness-based relapse prevention, is to do this group, abstinence is not required. So there is this component of where there can be this harm reduction, or people are in their recovery where maybe they're reducing use, they're seeing it as an issue and they're maybe not totally sure what they're going to do with it, and they know they want something different. So this could vary where someone is fully abstinent. It could be they're in the process of reducing. It could be that they have chosen that these are behaviors that I do want to address. Maybe these ones I'm not sure if I want to yet. It takes on the approach of really looking at things in a non-judgmental way, that lapses aren't seen as failures. But again, if you go back to that curiosity and beginner's mind, it's more of looking at that, so, kind of what occurred right before the lapse, what occurred during, after, and taking that noticing and recognizing where you may then with being able to notice those things may be able to decide, how can I take that step back and maybe respond differently? And do I want to respond differently? What does that mean? Looking at it as in exploring that myth that using substances, taking a look at, in the immediate moment, it may take away the pain or the uncomfortableness, or I get avoid dealing with whatever it is. But looking at that is not a permanent solution. It's a temporary that may not really get us to where we want to go. Again, bringing us back more awareness, decreasing that automatic thought and response, being able to recognize our vulnerabilities and being more able to tolerate and be comfortable or more accepting of vulnerabilities, and becoming more mindful of what we can and can't control. So one of the things, and this is taking a look at from the trauma perspective, when we're setting it up for individuals to participate in these mindfulness activities, is discussing this zone of engagement that when we're looking at being mindful, it's kind of like throwing ourselves all in, fully participating in the present moment. And I know already I've said intentional quite a bit. And part of that is when you're choosing to be mindful, you're making a choice. I'm intentionally trying to be present. So we want to talk about that in this continuum, as you're choosing to be more present, that you are going to experience different sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And we want to find within ourselves, and for every person, it's different. And there is no right, wrong, there is no judgment. You are where you are in this moment. And so being mindful of, how do I kind of find that part where I'm challenging myself, where I'm experiencing some discomfort, like, whenever I feel like loneliness, or maybe feeling abandonment, my reaction is, I do not want to feel that at all. And I'm going to do everything I can to avoid feeling that. And so the challenge is, how can I allow myself to feel some of that discomfort and sit with it, to allow myself to experience it and grow and move to a different place? But it's finding that middle ground. So it's not so overwhelming that it causes too much discomfort and pain and suffering. At the same time, we don't want it on the other continuum where you're avoiding risking feeling anything or noticing anything at all. So really talking about that, and also setting it up before any exercises to help people have a spot to anchor in. And talking to people, think about, before we enter this activity, do you have finding an anchor within yourself that feels safe? It could be just, if it does feel like it's starting to move from being a challenge to being overwhelming, I'm going to bring my attention to this anchor. This anchor could be your breath, just focusing in and out on your breath. It could be bringing attention to your hands. It could be bringing your attention to a spot in the room. But the whole idea is, this is an anchor. So if something is feeling too intense, gently bringing yourself back to that anchor, that feeling of safety, until the intensity decreases, where then you can go back. So this is really important to orient people to, and also when you're doing activities, to sporadically bring them back to that. Okay, so this is just kind of, we're not going to go into detail, but this is just kind of a breakout of the sessions. The first 3 sessions are really focused on helping us become more aware and being present in the moment. So all the practices within these are helping us to become more comfortable with dealing with the uncomfortable or experiencing the uncomfortable, and supporting us moving into becoming less reactive and more being able to take that moment to pause before we respond, to respond in a way that's more effective. The next 3 sessions, 4 through 6, is continuing to work on becoming more aware, more mindful, and how do we apply that into stressful situations. And then the last 2 is sessions really focusing on our overall well-being. How do we support this? What have we learned? How do we increase our supports? How do we want to continue to use mindfulness in our recovery? What does that look like? And moving forward. So what I've kind of done today, and hopefully with time, if we have time, I'm hoping that we have a chance to practice 3 different exercises. And I wanted to do an exercise. I just picked one exercise from each section. So the first 3 sessions, this is just kind of highlights of kind of the themes that it covers. Again, really the whole idea is becoming more aware of our automatic human nature to go into autopilot, where we just do, we kind of shut off being aware of our thinking, our feeling, and what's going on around us. We just do to do. And really moving more into the experiential and becoming more mindful and being able to increase our tolerance, that zones of engagement, our ability to tolerate just sitting and noticing and experiencing. It's important with this, we focus on sensations of the body first, because that tends to be, we tend to be very disconnected from our body and what our body is telling us. And so we don't want to move too quickly into the focus on emotions and thoughts, because we want to experience the sensations. So then we can more connect it, these sensations, how does that, connect to emotions, our thoughts, how do they all work together? And then ultimately being more kind to ourselves, so then that can expand out into the world to others. We're not going to go into this. Just these are different activities, exercises that you're going to be doing through the 3 sessions. And however, in each thing, you do want to talk about, things that may come up during practice, aversions, the desire to push away, like, I don't like this. This doesn't feel comfortable. I don't want to do this. You may notice cravings or a desire. So one myth that can happen with mindfulness or the expectation is, if I'm doing mindfulness, I'm going to be calm and peaceful. That may happen. And over time, the hope is over time, you are in everyday life, you're going to feel calmer. You're going to become less reactive. You're going to experience decreased depression, anxiety, whatever you're struggling with. And that doesn't necessarily happen right away and every time. And so it's kind of, you want to just talk about that, as you're experiencing this, there is no right or wrong way to experience mindfulness. If you do feel more calm and peaceful in today's exercise, great. And if you don't, that's okay too. But it's just noticing that curious beginner's mind, that you might notice restlessness, agitation, and just try to notice that and let it go, not attach. You might get drowsy. You might get sleepy. You might doubt if this is working. And this is where it's in the inquiry. you're going to be talking to the group and everybody's going to be talking about their experiences and kind of see that human connection and how hard it is to be mindful and stay in the moment, and that our minds wander. They go off task. So our first, now normally this is longer, but given the time, I'm just going to go through an example of doing a body scan. And so part of when you are setting up that activities, you want to approach it in an inviting way. So everything is kind of, you're providing choice and autonomy. And so you're inviting. So I'm inviting everyone who is on this today, if you're willing to participate in this activity, get yourself into a comfortable position. And during the group, you're inviting people to do what's comfortable with them, whether it's sitting in the chair, sitting on the floor, lying down, providing mats, cushions, and just having people, get to the level that they're comfortable in. And then also, before we start this, I'm inviting you to, you can keep your eyes open or close, whatever is most comfortable for you. And try to think of, before we start, again, that anchor for yourself. Thinking about, within myself, where is an anchor that I can hold on to feel safe in case, one, we're challenging ourselves to be okay with feeling an uncomfortable thought, emotion, body sensation, and we don't want it to become so overwhelming that it derails the process. So think, for you, is it just focusing on your breathing? It could be even counting, one breath in, one breath out. It could be focusing on a certain body part, a certain focus in the room. So I'm going to ask you, get in your comfortable position. Find, whether it's you close your eyes, you can go ahead and close your eyes. You can, if you're keeping your eyes open, kind of finding that focal point. And we're just going to do a quick body scan. So we're first just going to start noticing your breathing. Just gently and slowly breathing in and out. You may notice your chest rising and contracting. And we're going to gently move our focus to our feet. Noticing any sensations. You may notice tension, tingling, maybe the temperature in the room. You may not notice anything, and that's okay. So we're going to moving now our focus from our feet into our calves. You may notice at any time your mind may wander. Gently bring it back to the moment without judgment, knowing that's what our mind does. It wanders. Noticing our calves. May notice our pants or the air around it. And then moving up into our knees, where the muscles connect, the tendons, our joints. Maybe noticing achiness. Just breathing. And then moving up to our thighs. Again, we may notice our thighs touching the chair or the floor. Experiencing whatever is in this moment. You may notice a pain. You can gently send breath to that spot. Really trying to just experience it, not labeling it, just noticing the sensations. Now leaving the thighs and moving into our abdomen. Feeling the rise and the fall as we breathe. Noticing any sensations. Maybe hearing noises. Maybe experiencing tightening. Maybe not noticing anything. Now moving from our abdomen up through our back, just being aware of any tightness, any contracting, moving up through the shoulders, breathing in, breathing out. Just noticing, not attaching to anything. Now moving up through our neck into our head. Maybe noticing our hair, movements in our face. Just noticing and allowing. Continuing to breathe in and out. Now, as we end this practice, if you have your eyes closed, you can open your eyes when you feel ready, bringing your awareness back into the room. Now, if we were in session with this, this is where we would start the inquiry. And again, with the inquiry, it would be asking and even thinking right now, what did you notice during the practice? And with the inquiry, you can sometimes, depending on how people respond, you go, someone may say, I noticed tension. And so it may be, well, where did you notice that in that body? What about that? How did you experience it? It might lead into, what did you feel? What emotions arose? It's important that we really want to focus on sensations in the body first to kind of avoid attaching into the story. And then you're also bringing in other members. What did other people experience? What did they notice? And as you continued through the inquiry, I brought it up earlier, you're talking about what arose that was familiar to you? What was different, new? Maybe a new insight that you haven't thought about before or noticed before. You know, how does it play out in your everyday life? And also talking, because often you're going to talk about, well, I had a really hard time staying focused. I didn't stay mindful. I kept thinking about this. And yeah, that makes sense. That's what we do, you know, and no matter how much you practice mindfulness, there are going to be times it's easier and other times it's harder in talking about that experience. So body scanning is usually one of the typical things we first start talking about. So moving into the next 3 sessions, sessions 4 through 6. So this is a time we're really diving in more, you know, because with mindfulness-based prevention, you provide homework and you're asking participants to engage in regular mindfulness activities. And based on each session, you're going to be asking them to do different things. You're also going to be asking them to track and notice, you know, their sensations, their emotions, their thoughts, and what they have experienced throughout the week. So as you're getting more into it, they're getting more, developing a little bit more pattern of practicing mindfulness. You're going to be discussing more challenging situations where it's maybe hard for them to be mindful. Exploring more situations they want to avoid where it's difficult to stay present. Becoming more tolerant of the uncomfortable. You know, and also exploring how this impacts their behaviors and tendency to react, and using mindfulness as a way to respond. And also the idea of just because you have this emotion or this urge or this craving or this desire doesn't mean that you have to respond to it in that moment. So here are some exercises that we kind of are part of the next 3 sessions. And so one of the exercises that I want to do, and this is something that's going to come throughout these 3 sessions and the last 2 sessions in different forms, is developing this mindfulness called sober space. So sober space, and each letter, whoops, sorry about that. Hold on. Let's go back to this. So each letter stands for something. So the S in sober stands for stop, or let's shift. And so if you're thinking about this in a challenging situation, you're taking, and let me just kind of move to this. So with sober, I'm going to kind of give you the acronym, and then we'll take a moment to practice. But the S is for either taking a step back, stopping, or intentionally taking a shift instead of just reacting or doing something in this moment. We're taking a pause. And then we're moving into the O of observing and just noticing, really trying to hold on to that non-judgmental stance and noticing the sensations in our body, our emotions, our thoughts, but not attaching, not holding on to them, just noticing and taking that curiosity, that, beginner's mind, that curiosity. Focusing on the breathing, really taking time to slowly breathe and connect with ourselves. And then kind of expanding then to the whole experience, the whole situation as a whole, with everything, our sensations, emotions, thoughts, trying to take into context all that is happening in this moment without judgment, and then mindfully deciding how we want to respond. And this is something that doesn't have to this could just take a couple of minutes, or depending if you're still finding yourself wanting to do, even if it's not in most effective or in your best interest, taking longer for each section. So what I would like people to do, again, if you think of that zone of engagement, and we're just going to do this really quickly for like 2 minutes based on time, is really thinking about a situation that maybe recently has come up that maybe you did not respond to in the most effective way. Your behavior or what you did, your thoughts, maybe what you said wasn't the most effective. So kind of think about that moment and kind of look at it and think about, okay, if I would go back to that moment in time, or it could be something that's currently happening again, not something that's going to challenge you, but not that's so overwhelming that you can't experience this. So if you take a moment, think about that situation. You're taking a step back. You're stopping. You're just observing and noticing. In that moment, what did you feel in your body? Was there tension? Was there clenching? Maybe your heart sped up. Maybe you felt nauseous. Maybe your fists closed. If you think about flight, fight, freeze. Any emotions that arose. Any thoughts that might have popped up. And this isn't a space to judge any of this. This is just noticing. And taking some slow breaths in and out. Breathing in, breathing out. And bringing your awareness to the whole situation. Your body, what you're experiencing in this moment. And then just thinking about how you could mindfully proceed in this situation that would be most effective or work out for your best interest or the best interest of everyone, depending on what your goal is for that situation. So that is a quick example of sober space in a challenging situation. So session 7 and 8, again, is kind of the wrap up of what they've been experiencing in the last 6 sessions, exploring that whole balance of being in the moment, intentionally, self-care, looking at what does a regular practice look like for you, being mindful of what are situations that you really struggle with and kind of move you away from how you want to respond, how you want your recovery to look like. and how to use mindfulness intentionally in those situations. How you can create a support network to help support you even more so in your recovery and being mindful and intentional of how you live. Exploring, and we talk about being uncomfortable. For many of us, it's really uncomfortable for us to reach out when we are struggling, and exploring how that fits with being intentional and mindful. Continuing to look at how do we further develop our practice, maintain it, and overall being able to reflect over the last few weeks of what we've experienced and what we've learned. These are just some of the exercises. I was hoping we'd have time to do a kindness meditation, and I don't think we're going to have time. But part of the kindness meditation is really to reinforce that self-compassion to ourselves and to others. And this is just some adaptation. You know, as you're planning and doing each group, you're going to be looking at the needs of the group. You know, looking at any adaptations you may need to make based on culture, based on ages of the group, who's in the group. Do you want this group to be gender focused, and what that will look like? This group can run anywhere from, as you know, the ideal is like 8 to 10, 12 people, and you can do it with it as little as 3 or as large as 18. It's just being mindful. You can provide this series as closed versus open. It's just being mindful of where people are at and how you want to do the orientation for the group. You can look at extending in the sense of, based on the needs of the group, you can make it, in general, this is a 2-hour, 2.5-hour group. However, based on the needs, it could be an hour. You could increase sessions if you're making it shorter to move through. So there is the ability to adapt it. And also in the book, there is the use of a fidelity scale to kind of be mindful of, am I incorporating all the components of this evidence-based treatment? And where do I fall in line? What are we doing well with this process? What could we do better? So it just kind of gives you a guide. So that is a very brief overview of mindfulness-based relapse prevention. And I think we have a couple minutes if there's any questions.
All right, just going through the questions, a lot of comments about just how the practice was really amazing and how easy it is to forget to be mindful in the things that you're doing. As a reminder to everybody, some folks were asking about the PowerPoint presentation and the slides. About 3 to 5 days after the presentation, the PowerPoint will be available on the CMH website under the Recovery Summit. So Michelle has been very willing to share that. Also, the taping from today, Michelle has also agreed to share that. So in about a week or so, today's taping should be on the CMH YouTube site. So folks can go there to be able to watch it as well too. Again, a lot of people just talking about how great and mindful it was and really engaged and involved in it, Michelle. So we greatly appreciate it. It's something that I think was a beautiful way to start out the day today, to be honest with you, going
Yes.
into the rest of the week. So we greatly appreciate that so much. So we're going to go ahead and do wrap up. Michelle, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your information. It is greatly appreciated with everyone. So thank you very, very much. And I'm going to go ahead and do the closing. As a reminder, the Recovery Summit continues to go on until the end of this week. So we have presentations tomorrow and then our wrap up with our panel discussion on Friday. Tomorrow's presentation will be at 10 a.m. It's presented by Alicia Fay from the Odyssey House, and it is entitled, "We Are Okay with LGBTQA+. Breaking the Stigma of SUD." To see information and register for that session or the panel session, please visit sccmh.org under the events tab in the Recovery Summit. That's the same place you're going to find the PowerPoints from all of the presentations from the Recovery Summit that the presenters offered to share. Individuals requesting your professional credits, you will receive via email one sheet with all of your accumulated credits. That should be coming to you by October 30th, so be on the lookout for that. And as a reminder, please complete the short survey at the conclusion of this webinar. We will greatly appreciate that. Again, thank you so much, Michelle, for all of your time and information. It's greatly appreciated, and we wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks so much.
All right. And thank you, everyone. And I did put my email in the chat. If anybody has any questions or wants resources, feel totally free to reach out.